I agreed to look after a secluded house for just one night because I needed money urgently, but at 3:07 a.m., someone started banging on my bedroom door from the other side of the house, even though I was completely alone. There are decisions you make in 5 seconds and pay for over years. Mine was made on a Tuesday night, sitting on the floor of my apartment because I had already sold my chair, staring at a bank notification that said I had $11.40 in my account. $11. Not even a dramatic amount. It was a ridiculous, hollow number, the kind that makes you laugh before it makes you want to cry. My name is Daniel. I was 28 at the time, though it felt like 40. I had been unemployed for 4 months after the graphic design agency I worked for shut down overnight, without warning, with a 3-paragraph email that basically said thanks for everything, good luck, goodbye. I had sent resumes to 72 companies. I had 4 interviews. None of them led anywhere. Rent was due in 6 days. It was $820 I didn't have, and my landlord, a man named Arthur who had once seemed friendly, had left me a voicemail that afternoon leaving no room for interpretation. This time, there would be no extension. I was in a Facebook group called Quick Jobs and Local Gigs that I had found weeks earlier. It was the kind of group where people posted things like need help moving a couch or paying $20 to walk my dog this week. I had done everything there. Painted a fence, assembled IKEA furniture, carried boxes for 6 hours for a family moving out. Nothing was enough. The numbers didn't add up. That night, while staring at my apartment ceiling, I checked the group out of habit, not expecting anything special. And then I saw it. The post was only 40 minutes old. It had been written by someone with the profile name Martin H. The profile picture was blurry, just a faint silhouette of a middle-aged figure. The text said the following, and I remember it almost word for word because I read it 5 times in a row. I need a trustworthy person to watch my property this Friday night. It is a house in a rural area, fully equipped, about 45 minutes from downtown. The person only needs to be present from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. Saturday. No experience or special skills required. Just physical presence. Cash payment upon completion, $400. Contact via private message only, $400. For lying down in someone else's house for 11 hours. I didn't think too much about it. I messaged him immediately. Martin replied within 10 minutes, which felt odd in hindsight, as if he had been waiting with his phone in hand. He said the house had been unoccupied for several months, that he lived in another state, and that he needed someone to simply be there to deter any intrusion while he arranged details of a possible sale. He explained there had been issues with people entering the property when it was empty. Nothing violent, he said. Just curious visitors, teenagers, that kind of thing. It sounded completely reasonable. I asked for more details. He sent the address, told me the key would be under a flower pot on the front porch, and that inside I would find everything needed to stay comfortable overnight. Heating, a bed, a functional kitchen. He only asked one thing, that I not bring anyone else, that I come alone. It's an insurance condition for the property, he wrote. Nothing personal. I asked if I could meet him beforehand to sign something, any formal agreement. He said he was out of state and couldn't, but if it made me more comfortable, he could send me his property identification number and the name of the real estate agent handling the sale. He did. I looked up the agent. It existed. I checked the address in county records. It existed too, and Martin H. appeared as the owner for 12 years. It was real. Everything was verifiable. I said yes. On Friday I arrived at the address at 8:45 p.m., 15 minutes early because I'm the kind of person who shows up early when money is involved. I drove 43 minutes from the city, the last 15 on a 2-lane road without streetlights, surrounded by trees on both sides. It wasn't eerie in a dramatic sense. It was simply dark. The kind of darkness you forget exists after years of city living. The house appeared at the end of a gravel driveway. It was larger than I expected, 2 stories, white-painted wooden walls, a front veranda with 2 wooden chairs. It had the look of a place that was once deeply loved and now just waits. The windows were dark. No car was parked outside. No signs of life anywhere. I found the key exactly where Martin said it would be, under a red clay flower pot beside the front door. I took it, inserted it into the lock, and turned. The door opened with a sound that wasn't quite a creak, more like an exhale, as if the house had been holding its breath for a long time. I stepped inside, turned on the hallway light, and at that exact moment, from somewhere upstairs, I heard a knock. Just one. Dry, sharp, final. I froze for 3 or 4 full seconds, my hand still on the switch, not breathing. Then I told myself what any reasonable adult tells themselves in that situation, it was the house. Old buildings make noises. Beams contract in the cold. It was completely normal. I repeated it until I almost believed it. I explored every room on the ground floor before going upstairs, not because I was exactly afraid, but because it felt like the sensible thing to do. It was what someone there to deter intrusions was supposed to do, after all. I was doing my job. The kitchen was spacious and smelled of old wood and something faintly sweet I couldn't identify. There was an electric kettle on the counter and an unopened box of tea beside the sink. In the fridge, I found a bottle of water and nothing else. The living room had a large cream-colored fabric sofa, a dark wooden coffee table, and a fireplace that clearly hadn't been used in a long time. On the mantel was a framed photograph, a family. Father, mother, 2 small children. All smiling. The man could have been in his 50s, gray hair, slim build. I assumed it was Martin, though I had never seen him. There was a small study at the end of the hallway with a desk chair and several unopened boxes stacked in the corner. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust that suggested months of abandonment, not weeks. 6 months, maybe more. I went upstairs. The second floor had 4 doors, 3 closed and 1 open. The open one was the bathroom. I pushed the others one by one. A master bedroom with a made double bed and clean sheets, which I appreciated. A room that looked like it had belonged to a child, with a bookshelf and a small desk, everything perfectly arranged. And at the end of the hallway, a door that unlike the others had its latch engaged. I stopped in front of that door. The latch was the kind that locks from the inside. That meant someone had engaged it from within that room. And then, somehow, they were no longer inside. Or so I hoped. I knocked. 3 soft taps, almost absurd in hindsight, the kind of thing you do when you know no one is there but still need the ritual of checking. Silence. I tried the handle. The latch gave way from the outside with a bit of pressure, which also didn't make sense if it had truly been locked from within, so I told myself it was just worn wood, an old mechanism no longer working properly. I opened the door. It was a storage room. Boxes, folded bags of clothing, a lamp without a shade, what looked like the frame of a child's bicycle leaning against the wall. Nothing remarkable. Nothing alarming. I went back to the master bedroom, placed my backpack on the corner chair, and decided the most reasonable thing to do was try to do what I had been paid for, be present. I didn't have to enjoy it. I just had to endure 11 hours. It was 10:15 p.m. I sat on the bed with my phone. The signal was 1 bar, sometimes 2, enough to send texts but not enough to load videos smoothly. I messaged my friend Elena, the only person who knew where I was, telling her I had arrived safely and the house was normal. Elena replied with an "Okay, text me if you need anything," and 2 minutes later, "Seriously Daniel, text me if anything feels off." I told her I'd be fine. That $400 was absolutely worth an uncomfortable night. For the first hour, silence was the hardest part. Not the kind of silence a city has late at night when traffic fades. Real silence. The kind where you can hear your own breathing as if it belongs to something else, where every small sound becomes amplified into something larger. The house creaked. The beams in the ceiling contracted and expanded with temperature shifts. Wind outside pressed against the window frames with a steady, gentle force. I got used to those sounds in the first hour. I catalogued them mentally. Normalized them. That long creak comes from the northwest corner of the ceiling. That dull thud is the heating pipe. That distant whistle is wind slipping through a poorly sealed bathroom window. By midnight, I had convinced myself I understood the sound grammar of the house. Then something different began. It was a sound that didn't fit any of my categories. It came from downstairs, on the ground floor, and it was intermittent. Not continuous. Not a beam shifting or a pipe knocking. It was closer to footsteps. Slow, pausing between each one, as if someone were moving very carefully, trying not to make noise, and failing anyway. I sat up straight on the bed. I listened for 30 seconds without moving. Silence. Then another sound. This time unmistakable, the groan of a stair under weight. Someone was coming up the stairs. I got up in one motion, phone in hand, and made the first serious mistake of the night. Instead of staying still and calling emergency services, I opened the bedroom door and looked into the hallway. The hallway was completely dark and completely empty. The sound had stopped. I stood there without turning on the light for a period I can't measure precisely, because perception fractures in that state. It could have been a minute. It could have been 5. Nothing. I went downstairs slowly, turned on every light on the ground floor one by one, checked the front door, checked the living room and kitchen windows. All locked. Everything exactly as I had left it. I went back upstairs, checked the bathroom, checked the child's room, looked into the storage room. All empty. It was 12:38 a.m. I told myself, with a firmness that was already starting to crack, that it had been my imagination. That months of stress had put my nerves in a state where any ambiguous sound became a threat. That $400 was worth dealing with an overactive mind. I went back to the bedroom, lay down on the sheets without taking off my clothes or shoes, and decided I would not open that door again until morning. That decision lasted exactly 2 hours and 29 minutes. I hadn't been able to sleep. I had been stuck in that uncomfortable in-between state where the body is exhausted but the mind refuses to shut off, where you close your eyes and behind your eyelids there's constant, meaningless activity, fragments of thoughts that never complete, images that never form stories. I had stared at the ceiling, then the window, then the ceiling again. The wind outside had picked up. The house kept speaking in its language of creaks and vibrations. Nothing else. Nothing out of the ordinary. I had convinced myself the midnight episode was exactly what I had always known it was, my mind. Then my phone showed 3:07 a.m. and the knocking began. It wasn't a beam creaking. It wasn't a pipe hitting. It wasn't the wind. It was deliberate knocking. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 knocks, a pause. The rhythm of someone at a door. It was coming from outside my room. Not from downstairs. Not from outside the house. From the hallway, just centimeters beyond my bedroom door. I sat up so fast I nearly fell off the bed. I stayed on the edge of the mattress with my body rigid, feet on the floor, phone clenched in both hands. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was different from all the previous silences of that night. It was a charged silence. The kind that only exists when something on the other side is listening just as closely as you are. 10 seconds passed. Maybe 20. Then 3 more knocks. Stronger this time. More urgent. I didn't scream. That still surprises me. If someone had asked me beforehand how I would react to something like that, I would have said I would scream. But I didn't. I stayed completely silent, mouth open, no sound coming out, performing the shape of a scream without producing it. I dialed emergency services but didn't press call. My finger hovered over the green button, calculating. If there was someone outside that door, what would happen when they saw me on the phone? If there was no one, what was the point of calling? If there was someone and they were dangerous, how long would it take for anyone to get here, 45 minutes away from the city? I decided I needed information before acting. I needed to know what was on the other side of that door. I stood up. I moved toward the door without making noise, which was difficult because the wooden floor had its own opinions about silence. Every step was a negotiation. I reached the door, pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. A breath that could have been mine or could have come from the other side, impossible to tell. I put my hand on the doorknob, and then, from the other side, centimeters from my face, with only the thickness of a door between us, I heard something worse than any knock. A voice. Low, almost inaudible, like someone speaking through clenched teeth or in sleep, without volume or intention. But I recognized the words. It was my name. I opened the door. I can't say why I made that decision instead of the other one, the sensible one, staying inside, calling 911, and waiting. I suppose there's something in the human brain that, when things become strange enough, chooses knowing over ignoring. Or maybe hearing my name in that darkness triggered something other than pure fear. It was closer to disbelief. And disbelief, unlike fear, pushes you forward instead of freezing you in place. I threw the door open in one motion and switched on the hallway light at the same time. The hallway was empty. The 4 doors were closed, exactly as I had left them. The wooden floor showed no footprints, no shadows. The far end of the hallway, where the stairs led down to the ground floor, was fully visible and completely deserted. There was no one. I stood in the doorway for a period I can't measure, scanning the hallway over and over as if something might suddenly appear where nothing was. Nothing changed. The house creaked once, faintly, and then returned to its usual silence. I walked to the stairs and looked down. The ground floor lights were off, just as I had left them when I came up. I went down the first 5 steps, enough to see the entrance and part of the living room. Everything still. Everything in place. I went back upstairs. That was when I noticed the storage room door was open. I had closed it. I was certain I had closed it. I could remember it clearly. I had checked the room, seen the boxes and bags and bicycle frame, and closed the door on my way out. The latch had clicked into place. Now it was open about 20 centimeters. I approached slowly. I pushed it with my fingertips, opening it fully, and turned on the light inside. The boxes were still there. The folded bags of clothes. The lamp without a shade. But something had changed. The bicycle frame, which I remembered leaning against the back wall, was now in the center of the room, lying on the floor, as if someone had pushed it or tripped over it in the dark. I stared at it for several seconds. Then I looked up, toward the ceiling of the storage room, and I saw the hatch. It was small, square, the kind used to access the space under the roof or an attic. It was made of the same wood as the ceiling, which made it easy to miss if you weren't looking directly at it. It had a metal ring handle. It was slightly open. Not fully open. Not forced. Just ajar, about 3 or 4 centimeters, with thick, impenetrable darkness on the other side. I stood completely still, staring at it, for what was probably 15 or 20 seconds of absolute silence. Then, from inside the attic, I heard the unmistakable sound of something moving. Not a beam creaking. It was the distributed, rhythmic weight of a human body shifting across a wooden surface. Slow, careful, moving away. I left the storage room, went down the stairs, opened the front door, walked to my car parked on the gravel driveway, and locked myself inside with the engine running. Then, finally, I called 911. The operator told me to stay in the vehicle and not go back inside. She said she would dispatch a unit. She asked if I felt in immediate danger. I told her I didn't know. The patrol arrived 17 minutes later. 2 officers, a man and a woman, young, with high-beam flashlights. I explained what had happened while all 3 of us stared at the dark house from the driveway. They listened without interrupting. Then they went inside. I waited in the car. 22 minutes passed. When the officer came back out and walked toward me, his expression wasn't that of someone who had found nothing. It was the neutral, slightly uncomfortable expression of someone who has to tell another person something that they know won't resolve anything. "No one is in the house," he said. "We checked everything, including the attic." He paused. "But we did find something we want you to see." I went upstairs with them. The attic wasn't a livable space, barely 1.5 meters of height at its highest point, the floor covered in fiberglass insulation and beams spaced every 1.5 meters. The officer held the flashlight while I looked through the open hatch, not fully stepping inside. There was an area where the dust and insulation had been pressed down, a surface roughly 1.5 by 2 meters, compacted, as if someone had been lying there for a prolonged period. Not hours. Days, maybe. Or longer. Next to that flattened area were 3 objects. The officer's flashlight lit them one by one, and I looked without saying a word. The first was an empty plastic water bottle, crushed. The second was a thin blanket, folded with some care, the kind sold in camping stores. The third was a mobile phone, powered off. Its back screen cracked. "What we know," the officer explained while we stood in the upstairs hallway, "is that someone had been living in that attic. We can't tell you for how long. What we can say is that the hatch shows signs of recent use, and those items haven't been up there for months. The dust on them is minimal." I asked what I had been wanting to ask ever since I saw the blanket. "Who was it? Do you know who it was?" He said they couldn't know without further investigation. He said they would take the phone as evidence. He asked if I knew anything about the owner of the house that might be relevant. I gave them the name Martin H. I gave them the phone number that had contacted me. I gave them the entire Facebook conversation. The officer stepped away and spoke into his radio for several minutes. When he returned, his expression had changed slightly. Not dramatically. Just that small adjustment in the muscles around the eyes that signals something has stopped being routine. "The phone number you have," he said carefully, "is registered to a person who, according to county records, has been missing for 8 months. I stared at her. "Martin?" I asked. She nodded once. It was never fully resolved. That's what I struggle most to explain when I tell this story, because people always expect a clean ending, a conclusion that ties everything together. The reality is that things don't always work that way. What we do know, what investigators determined in the weeks that followed, is that someone had been living in that attic intermittently for at least several months. The phone was traced to someone who was not Martin, whose identity was not disclosed to me due to an ongoing investigation. The Facebook conversation, tracked by technicians, came from a profile created specifically to contact people in local job groups, of which I was not the only one. The other 2 never went to the house. I did. I don't know exactly what that person wanted. I don't know if the knocking and the whisper of my name was a way of communicating, of scaring me, of asking me to leave, or something else I can't quite bring myself to define. I don't know if I was ever in real danger or if I simply spent a night sharing space with someone who was desperate and used darkness and fear as a shield. What I do know is that $11.40 in a bank account can lead you to make 5-second decisions that take years to process. I never took jobs like that again. I found work 3 weeks later at a small design company that didn't pay well but paid on time. Rent was covered by an advance Elena lent me, which she never charged interest for, and when I paid her back she only told me to call her before I got myself into anything like that again. But there are nights, still, when I wake up at some random hour and the first thing I do is check my phone. And if it's 3:07 a.m., it takes me a long time to fall back asleep.